set.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our work session of Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. Can I have a motion to open the work session?
I move to open the work session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, well, we have some old friends here, I see. Why don't we get started with Summit Greenfield Toll Brothers petition? Ed, do you wanna kind of walk us through it, or should we just move right to the presentation from?
Well, we received the letter submission back in April. It's lengthy, it's in the public packet. I think we should just turn and hear from Felix or whomever is going to speak on behalf of the applicant.
Janet's like 800 an hour, we're gonna let her start.
All right, so for those of you just listening in, they're in the packet, as Ed just said. There are a number of requests from Summit Greenfield / Toll Brothers. So take it away, we'd love to hear what you got to say.
So thank you, good evening, members of the board, supervisor. It's nice to see you in person again. Some of you are new faces to me, but others are familiar. So thank you for having us. I'm a partner with Del Bello, Donnelly, Weingarten, Wise and Whitaker, and I'm here this evening on behalf of Chappaqua Crossing, as you know. As Ed mentioned, we filed a lengthy application back in April. And it was a joint application to both the town board and to the planning board for some modifications to the project. Now that, the project is up and running and it's been, being utilized now for some period of time, we're seeing some things that we believe require some changes to ensure the future success of the center and the development. Some of those things are related to COVID, others are not. And so I just wanted to briefly let you know what those things were, and then I'll turn it over to Felix. He gets a highly discounted rate, so don't believe him when he says it's that expensive. So a couple of different things. The first thing, and there are certain things that are for this board's consideration. There are certain things that are for the planning board's consideration. There are certain things that are for joint consideration. And because you are the lead agency for purposes of environmental review, we want to talk to you about all of those different things. So there is a petition which was part of this application. We're seeking certain modifications to the zoning code, to the OPR district. There were certain limitations, as you might remember, having to do with the sale of liquor. Not more than 25% of floor area devoted to the sale of liquor, wine, beer, or other alcoholic beverages. That really precludes the establishment of any sort of a wine or liquor store in that center. That's one of the modifications that we were looking for, was to eliminate that floor area restriction. Another part of that petition for the amendments to the zoning code have to do with carry-out restaurants. So they are permitted in that overlay district. Restaurants, and the way the zoning code reads, it says restaurants and carry-out restaurants, and then it says provided that carry-out restaurants cannot exceed 7,500 square feet of floor area. So that's resulted in some limitations on being able to lease out some of the smaller spaces in the center. And so we were looking for a modification to that portion of the zoning code to just eliminate that size, the size restriction. And that's all contained in the petition that you have before you. The next item that we were seeking was there, if you may or may not remember this was something that I think was discussed at the town board level, but was really a planning board matter and had to do with the site plan for the retail component of the project. And that was that there is a prohibition in the site plan condition of approval, that all of the dumpsters and the trash has to be maintained inside the building. And that's posing a problem. And it's something that doesn't really exist in the marketplace. It's very hard to store your trash and everything inside the building. So we're seeking a modification to that site plan approval to allow dumpster and dumpster enclosures outside of the building. It just makes everything easier. As you know, you do have your trash removal dumpsters outside at Chappaqua. We think it should be the same for this project as well. The third item has to do with the residential portion, which is going to be developed by toll, and there was a planning board condition of approval which required the extension of a water main out to Cowden Lane. It was something that was considered extra, and it's something that doesn't provide any public benefit from this connection, and it's also an exaction that is extremely expensive for the applicant without addressing any of it. The project doesn't result in any impacts which would require that extension. It's completely ancillary, and so we're asking the planning board to reconsider that condition given the cost of that improvement. And then the other matter that we wanted to discuss, and this is a town board and a planning board matter, and that has to do with the East Village and the guest house that's at the East Village. As you know, as part of the conditions of approval, it was anticipated that the guest house would be adaptively reused, and as part of the approvals that we went through with toll, it was proposed to be adaptively reused. What we're finding is that the cost of that adaptive reuse is just exorbitant, and the benefit for the preservation of that or the adaptive reuse really outweighs the historical benefit of that. So we are seeking a modification to the finding statement and to the planning board conditions that require that to be adaptively reused, and it's requested that it allowed to be replicated, and it's proposed to look exactly the same as it looks today, but it would be reconstructed. So Felix is here to talk to you about the details of that, and then we can talk about how the process should proceed. I think that with the petition, you're required under the town code to refer it to the planning board for the planning board's review and recommendation on those zoning provisions, and then we can talk about the other modifications as well.
Yeah. I think the easiest way to address this would be to go point by point, so we can ask questions on each one. So I don't know who wants to do that, if you wanna.
I've kind of got it broken into those segments, cause a simple mind, right? Just like one task at a time. Felix Charney, Summit Development. Greenfield's been gone for 4 years. So I'm now the only remaining owner of the remaining assets. I was anxious to come back. It's been so long. When we started, you were way over there and you wouldn't say anything. You just were all about Annandale. Now you're here and you've moved to the middle. It's like the project, everything evolved.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we've not met. How do you do? We have.
School board, I'm Vicky Tip, remember?
Oh.
We did meet, but now I'm on a different board. I'm here instead of
Well, I'm
somewhere else.
67 now. I can barely remember how to get here. But nice to see you again. And I
Yeah.
don't think we've met, have we?
You've not.
Okay.
Kid, come on.
I'm sorry. So just for your benefit, we bought this in 2004. That's how long this has been going on. If I could do the math in my head, I think it's 18 years. So I know I've got the hair to show for it. The discussion tonight, I wanted to really give you an opportunity to make a determination how you want to use the dollars that are associated with these, I'm calling them chores. The project, I think, evolved in a very controversial way, really surrounded by fear. And everybody was afraid. Was afraid we were gonna wreck the town, we were gonna destroy the roads, we were gonna ruin the schools. There were a lot of things that we were going to do. Sometimes I ask myself, what exactly did we do that turned out to be such a disaster? What fear was ultimately realized? And I kind of leave that as a question out here because I understand when change is a very difficult thing for people to ultimately agree to. And taking a 114-acre old Reader's Digest building and going through an adaptive reuse of it is a very controversial process. And for us, it morphed all over the place. I mean, it started off as just building 350 condominiums, which is what the town asked us to build, and turned into what it is today. But through each of those twists and turns, everybody sprinkled their own little bits of control or safety devices on the project. And I think to a certain degree, we overmanaged it. So really what I'm talking about tonight, having done this for 18 years, is the benefit of hindsight. So the first thing I wanted to give you guys, just at a high level, is just to show you what some of those little conditions cost. These are all of the extra things that, I can't even hand this out correctly, did you get one? These are all of the little things that were added to the project. Oh, you
But
want one?
Felix, I mean, that was it was added from the initial proposal, but I mean, I personally think the project is much better now than was initially proposed, given what we put into it.
I'm not suggesting otherwise. Like, can I still call you Lisa, or now that you're in this position of authority, I have to
I
refer?
would say you can call me whatever you'd like, but I'm scared
Well,
to
publicly,
say that.
publicly.
You can call me Lisa.
The point is, if you look at page 2, there's about $19 million that was spent in various conditions. Now, some of the conditions that you imposed upon us, I think created a tremendous community benefit. Although the intersection was a bloody nightmare between the roundabout and the intersection, everybody can agree the roads and those turns work better for everyone. It was very expensive for me, but it's actually something that we did that I think has a tremendous community benefit. And then when Rob and I negotiated the improvements to the school, I think those are a community benefit. But I sometimes look back and think about the $1,400,000 we spent to get Whole Foods open in December. And the $850 million worth of liability insurance you guys asked me to buy. And the $200,000 of police overtime to sit in the intersection to make sure everybody can make a left or a right without crashing. And I kind of wonder if there was a better way to spend some of that money. And that's a little bit of the theme. At the end of the day, the conditions that are currently imposed upon us we'll have to live with. But I think there is now an opportunity, based on a little bit of hindsight, based on a little bit of logic, and specifically when we get into the retail, based on some of the changes that the world has experienced through COVID, that are appropriate to revisit. So to your point, Lisa, point by point. I'm out of the public speaking business, so now I get
Yeah, me too.
dry mouth. So let's do the retail ones first. This is a list of everybody that we marketed the property to. The concern when we started to build Chappaqua Crossing was that we were gonna hurt the downtown. And so you guys correctly imposed a whole series, if you could just pass those down, a whole series of protections, can't lease to this type of group and that type of group, because you thought it was gonna hurt the downtown. Well, I think what's in fact happened is the downtown isn't in great shape, and nor are we. And I'm not so sure that that has anything to do with what's changed in the retail world. We're in an e-commerce environment and we had COVID. Prior to COVID hitting, every single store at Chappaqua Crossing was leased, which included 2 restaurants. We've built 105 buildings in our career, which is in its 40th year. We like to believe we know how to lease. We've been unable to lease the balance of the shopping center. Why? Because of some of these restrictions. We recognize we don't need any more nail salons and things of that nature that you wanted to protect. But the 2 changes that we're currently asking for, I think address what has now really become a takeout environment for many food providers. And also, as David mentioned, or I'm sorry, Janet mentioned, the trash issue in terms of we've had a lot of resistance from the restaurants trying to keep their trash on the inside. And the last is the liquor.
Yeah, so why don't you start with that one? Tell me what are you exactly looking for, a liquor retail store or like
Yes.
a brewery?
The brewery would fall into the restaurant. We've been approached by some of those. None of those have materialized. All those brewery ideas just don't have any foundation. It's permission to put a liquor store at Chappaqua Crossing. That's what that request is.
And just out of curiosity, and I'm gonna look, I know what you want, but I'm also asking questions on behalf of the town because I am in the middle seat here. the town, downtown, has been leasing quite nicely. Have you tried lately? Nobody wants to come into Chappaqua Crossing other than a liquor store?
No, those are the people we presented it to, there's still all those vacancies. I don't own the shopping center anymore,
I know,
I sold it.
which is
Sold
also
it
a
at a
question,
$20 million
why
loss.
aren't they here
I'm
asking
here
for
as their
those?
representative. They asked me if I would go. They figured that I knew that I had a relationship with this community, both good and bad, and it was best if I came and asked for these modifications. But they have not done any of the restaurants that we intended. The shopping center was designed to take in 3 restaurants on all the hard corners. And they've only now gotten really one in there in Sweet Green, and the other one, of course, is the little cafe that works at a Lifetime Fitness, and then however one interprets all that happens at Whole Foods. But the restaurant portion of this has been a failure. And that's a combination of what's changed in the restaurant world, because all the restaurants got hurt bad through COVID. It's a little bit to do with the trash, and it's just a completely different leasing environment. So yes, one of the restaurant spaces might be used alternatively other than for a restaurant. But we've asked for permission to put a liquor store in, and we've asked if there is a food service facility that you expand its takeout capacity. Those 2 points are kind of tied together.
Right, so can you explain that one?
Sure.
What does carryout mean? So is carryout McDonald's?
No,
Or
because
is
you've outlawed.
carryout a Kittle House that is offering carryout food? Cause I agree, during the pandemic, every restaurant began to offer
Sure.
carryout because people weren't eating in restaurants, but I don't think we would call those carryout restaurants.
No, I
They were
think
they were like
and
white
I'll look
tablecloth
to Ed.
restaurants that happened to
I
have
think
carryout.
you legislated us out of the fast food business, which we understood and we think is appropriate. I know at one point Dunkin' Donuts wanted to come here. I was kind of concerned that felt too fast foody, but that Starbucks was a little sexier, and that seemed to have worked fine, and I don't think anybody's complained. And Starbucks downtown didn't close because we opened Starbucks up the street. Shopping center is missing some energy, and part of that energy was being provided by food service, and we've been unsuccessful doing so. So we're trying, shopping center, it all lives off one another. So we've got the best anchor there is. But when I brought in Whole Foods, which was the game changer for all of us, I had to lease them that space at $16. And my Whole Foods in Fairfield is $35. The average Whole Foods rent across this area into New Jersey and Long Island, things of that nature, is higher. They paid me $16 because it's what I had to do to get them to come here. And we banked that ultimately once Whole Foods was here, all of these others would come in. And in fact, they were. But then COVID kind of kicked us right at the end. So our request this evening is to modify those 2 conditions, to have a liquor store and to expand.
But
Take a-
define for me, what is a carryout restaurant in your view? What are you thinking this is going to include?
So like a Chopped or something of that nature, where there are some seats, but there's a lot more people who may pick it.
Well, is
So
Sweet
that's
Greens a
Sweet
carryout?
Green.
Like Sweet Greens.
How many
Is it-
square feet is that?
Sweet Greens is
3,000-ish?
yeah, I think it's 4,200.
Yeah, and I don't know the percentage, Christian, of how much food is taken out of Sweet Greens. They're probably in violation of the very regulation we're talking about, whether everybody eats it there or takes it to their desk.
No, because you can have up to 7,500 square feet of carryout, so if it's only 4,000, you still have 3,500
But I guess
left.
the question is if 2 Sweet Greens existed in Chappaqua Crossing and in total they were 8,000 square feet, if they're not carryout, then you're not in violation. So the question is, are they carryout?
Well, the message that we all now have learned is that these restaurants are much more carry out than they are eat in, because we've kind of adopted that style, and that's really the basis of this request. At the time, the legislation, I believe, was put in really to make sure we didn't get into the fast food business.
But I guess just to play this out, right, you mentioned Chop, right? So let's say it's Kava. You know Kava?
I know the name, I
It's
don't know that, I've never been in a
It's
Kava.
it's sort of a Mediterranean food. There's one in Greenwich. You go in, or dig in the city. You go in and you walk up to the counter and they've got choices. And you take your tray and then they've got 20 or 30 seats at least, maybe 40 seats, like Sweet Greens, where there's tables everywhere.
Right,
There's certainly a number of people who go in and take it to go.
Right.
but there's seating for people to eat.
And in this case, what we're asking for, both would occur. There's a combination of seating, but
But I guess just to finish the thought,
Please.
are you contemplating a place where people walk in and there's a counter and there's a cooler with drinks and they walk up to the counter and then they leave and there's no seating?
not a situation where there's no seating, just a situation where there's a recognition that maybe more people will be taking out than what was originally contemplated in the legislation, because this was really written under a square footage assumption. So there isn't even a policing mechanism in the current regulations for you to come in and figure out, hey, they went out, they went in, that's a violation. I think it's an awkward law. And I think what we're trying to do is just trying to clean it up and say, the world's changed, more people are taking food out of these places, we're not looking to eliminate seating, we're not getting into a conversation of saying every store must have 10 seats. It's just that the world has changed.
Do you mind me asking one more question?
You can ask what- yeah.
I don't wanna
No, go ahead, and then
monopolize this. You mentioned that you had potential restaurant tenants before COVID. Can you
Sure.
say what or who they were?
Serafina was anchoring One Piece. Marketplace was opening their 9th store for a full service restaurant. Those were the two primaries that backed out. It's been a while now, Dave.
We actually had the lease signed with Marketplace and they were doing their MP Tavern theme there.
Right.
And when COVID hit, they had to shut down 13 of their locations and they begged us to get out of their lease. Since we know them and we've done other stores with them, we
So
allowed them out.
follow-up question, are you aware of the 2 restaurants that just opened in Chappaqua?
No,
Okay, so in the last 2 weeks, where Walgreens is, there's a space next door that used to house a place called Spoon, which was an Asian fusion restaurant. A Mediterranean steakhouse just opened last week. It's
I
called
saw that,
Mentors.
Ibiza or something.
It's called Mentors. Ibiza's been in town for about
Okay,
4
yeah.
years. And then just next to, across from the Village Market, down from the Starbucks in the center of town, a place called Basso 56 opened, which used to be in Midtown Manhattan on 56th Street. They closed during the pandemic because business dried up in Midtown Manhattan. They then found out that we had an open space where Aesop's Fable used to be, and they came in and opened Basso 56 2 weeks ago. So in the last 2 weeks, we've had 2, what I would consider to be quite
Yeah,
high-end.
those are good wins, especially if you're
high-end
downtown, because your
They're
downtown
fantastic.
needs an injection of energy and restaurants give you that energy, but we have not had the success filling these restaurant spaces, which are larger, maybe our rents are higher. But after COVID cleaned out a lot of the restaurant guys, and then when the restaurant guys came back into the market, they wanted to do what's called management deals, which is really where we build the space at $200 a foot and they pay a percentage of rent above a certain number. And that doesn't really work within our financial model. So maybe some of that is changing. I have a lot of other properties in other places, but we have an empty restaurant that just went out at the in Westport at exit 17 that overlooks the train and 95. 95 is still working, but nobody's back on the train. And it's across the street from a 4,000 space parking facility around the Westport train station. Restaurant world's changed. But if you got those stores here in town, that's a win for you, good for you. We're asking for relief on the definition of takeout. Jenna, you look like you wanna help me.
Yeah, I do, and
But if you relieve that definition, then 100% of the restaurants can be carryout.
No, I think
No, so there's a distinction in your zoning code among restaurants. There's 3 different distinctions. There's a restaurant, which is what I think, when you mention Kittle House, I think that that's what is intended by restaurant. Then there's something called a carryout restaurant. And that's defined as retail sale of food or beverage products for consumption off the premises, but which also includes incidental sales of ready-to-consume food or beverages from a counter-type installation. It also says that provided the area devoted to customer seating represents less than 25% of the gross floor area. So I think that what you're talking about when you talk about a carry-out restaurant, I think it's what we talk about in the land use business as something that's more like fast casual, not fast food, but something that's fast casual. Then there's your fast food restaurant, which is your typical fast food restaurant. So I think that what we're talking about is a place like Chopped or a place like Chipotle or something like that those are, I think, what would be considered under your zoning code as a carryout restaurant. And so what this provision in the code prohibits is carryout, provided that it's not more than 7,500 square feet. So we're not looking to eliminate carryout or change the definition of carryout or change the use in the district. What we're looking to do is eliminate the restriction on the 7,500 square feet.
Right, so that 100%, let's say, of the restaurant space could be carryout now.
No, not 100%.
Yeah,
You still
there's
have
no
the, you still have, you still
restriction.
have the seating.
Well, you still have the requirements that are in the zoning code and in the definition of restaurant, carryout restaurant, and fast food restaurant.
Right, I'm not talking about the definition. If we say you must have, I forget what the number is, a certain number of square feet of restaurants or carryout, but no more than 7,500 can be carryout, then if you take out the but no more, then technically 100% of the restaurant space could be carryout. Yes,
That could be,
right.
but
But
you
that's
have
not the
empty
intent.
space now, that's not the intent.
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
So forgive me for the
no,
interruption.
it's a, you know, it is a ask that is a function of what the new Heitman, the new shopping center owner sees the changing trends in terms of how people are dining and them not wanting to trip up something that they've got too many carry out going on and something. So there's still seating, and that's really the best I can answer the
Do you have
question.
restaurants in mind?
I'm not involved with the leasing anymore, Lisa. I sold it. I took my loss and I sold it.
I feel like the people
that's
who
the
own it
difficulty.
should be here,
Well,
so we can
This is
ask
who
them
you
those
have.
questions.
you,
Well, I love that you're here, but I think that the people who can actually answer those questions, who are gonna be the ones who are leasing the space, should be here to be able to answer those questions, cause we don't know them. And while I may trust you at your word,
well, I think that.
I don't know who these people even
Well,
are.
thank you for for the trust statement. I don't think there's anything untoward afoot here. I think that the regulations clearly set forth the understanding of to prevent exactly what y'all wanted to prevent, which we all agreed we wanted to prevent, which was fast food. So this is just the way these casual quick serve restaurants are currently operating. I guess you could take it to the furthest extreme. If we put in a Cold Stone Creamery, not a lot of people sitting there eating it. A lot of people are taking the ice cream cone and going outside. So it's more people are taking out. They're just trying to clean up the amount of takeout. That's all.
No, I understand. I mean, I think the original intent was that we wanted some sit down
So did
restaurants
we.
there.
Yeah, we were liquor licenses and bars and tablecloths and all of those things. And those were the two deals that we had, but they didn't make. So Christian's told me that some of these folks have come back from the dead and he's made some downtown deals, but we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it in Westport, which is where we do have now a vacancy in a pretty prolific restaurant town. It's just been tough to do those deals. So that's the ask along that line. The liquor store is black, I'm sorry?
For you. Have these attempts been ongoing or has there been a break in
No, so Atlantic is still, and what you can do is if you're passionate about, the same people who are handling the leasing for us are still on the job for Heitman. And that's Atlantic. Joe Mastromonaco is like one of the top, are you in the real estate business?
No, I'm not,
Okay,
really no.
okay, well, you know these names, so Joe Mastromonaco's, he's like one of the top guys around the area and he's still handling this and he could answer much more eloquently some of the prospects that are in his line. I know he's got the liquor stores and if you need us to drive Joe back down here, we can do that. He lives, where's Joe live?
In Somers.
He's a neighbor.
Mhm.
So those are the two retail questions. The third, of course, we're not supposed to talk about, but I love talking to you about it, which is how come you can have a dumpster and I can't?
That's a planning
planning
board,
board.
Yeah,
it's a
that's a
planning board
planning
ask,
board
right?
question,
That's
though.
not part of the PDCP, so that's purely, I think, a planning board question.
Well, if you were on the planning board and I said, how come you can have a dumpster and I can't, what would you say?
I'm not on the planning board.
Yeah,
Good answer, Jeremy. You see my point though.
Not
That-
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 I see your point on this, I do.
Can I, a couple general statements?
I will say that under the current agreement with the town, section 5.02 of the lease, you're not permitted to have that dumpster without our written permission. So it's the hypocrisy of you being able to put a dumpster 50 feet from a house where we wanna put, you know, dumpster locations that'll be hundreds of feet from any residence. I'd like to add that, you know, even though Felix has stepped away, you know, since we sold the shopping center in late December, Heitman has engaged us to do some work with them, and I've been working with the guys from Atlantic, and absolutely unequivocally, the dumpster issue about restaurants storing trash inside is the number one impediment to bringing them here to Chappaqua Crossing. Unequivocally. Joe Mastromonaco will tell you that, any retail broker would tell you that, so that's just.
So this ask here is easier to understand, there aren't that many questions on this one, I don't think. I wish we could decide this one for you. Because personally, I think you should, I think this is
You
not
like the goose and
difficult.
gander kind of
But
cliche.
but this is a planning board issue,
Right.
so we don't get to
And
decide this
and
one.
Ed had told us it was not rightly before you, but you know me, I just say whatever the heck I feel like saying, and I thought it was appropriate to share, especially given all our conversations about this bloody damn dumpster. So we'll, you know, once you deal with your referrals, depending on where we go, we'll bring that issue back up in front of them.
Mhm.
So those are really the three retail related points. The fourth point that was floating around out there at one point was, we were hoping at some point that you would take on your responsibility as a dual applicant to the DOT. We talked about that in December, to finish all of that railroad work that we were politely saddled with. But we've now managed somehow to get the DOT's attention.
Yes.
We still don't have the formal permission to start.
We don't have the formal permit, it's making its way through their process. We've been begging them to set the construction meeting so we could begin. They, for whatever reason, they've delayed, we're hoping to have an answer in the next couple of weeks. They've gotten everything that they've needed. It's just been impossible to get somebody to commit to having the kickoff meeting with the DOT. Meanwhile, you know, prior to that, they were asking when we're gonna start, we have been ready to start, the contracts are ready to go. We just need the DOT to.
Yeah, so the money has been in escrow at your place, not yours,
No, it is part of this in town.
for a long time. The concern that we have at this point in time is this was work that had a whole bunch of permutations attached to it in terms of people who are gonna be penalized if it didn't get done. But now all of a sudden, we're facing the reopening of school. I know we just ended school probably 5 minutes ago or next week, but we need to get this work done when the kids are not there. And the whole theory of having you as a dual applicant was that maybe, even though I know, Jill, you've been frustrated like we have with those folks, we just can't get anybody to pay attention to anything, but yet
If you figure out how to do that, let us know.
I know, but it becomes our problem, but we don't necessarily always have the tools to solve it. But right now,
I should bring this up on Thursday. So we have a meeting with some state legislators on
we're
Thursday.
ready to start,
will
we
bring
have the
this up
dough,
with them
and we
as
can
well.
finish it all pretty quickly, but heavens, if we all of a sudden bump up against the opening of the school, it's gonna be a problem again. So that wasn't necessarily before you anymore, cause I think that one kind of solved itself. So Ed also told us the Cowden Lane water line was dead on arrival, but I'm a big believer in resuscitation, and I went to 4 years of Catholic school, and at that point in my life, I believed in resurrection. I do no longer believe in that. Although in this particular instance, this, in my opinion, I'm gonna ask Dave to speak to this. This is $150,000 of wasted money that could otherwise be used for some other public benefit.
But this is also planning board, we
Doesn't-
don't have the ability to change this one.
I've been around here long enough to know how it works. And I think at this point, I'm trying to convince you folks on some of these costs. I gave you a piece of paper that showed you the money that we've spent. And we are willing to do certain improvements to the benefit of the community in return for relief from some of these improvements, which we believe have no benefit. If you would indulge Dave for 2 seconds on the facts behind this GD water line, I'd appreciate it. Or, no, that'd be CL, Cowden Lane.
So in April of 2021, Divney Tung Schwabe presented a report basically at the behest of the town and the town's professionals regarding the water line situation at Chappaqua Crossing. That report clearly indicated that there was no benefit, number one, to Chappaqua Crossing in either service or pressure, that the only benefit was for Cowden Lane, which is essentially a private road, which is also fed by the existing water line on Cowden Lane is fed by two separate access points. Why do they need a third at the cost of about $150,000? So it just, I believe that the code says that it has to benefit the project, right? And not anything off-site, is that correct? In terms of like those improvements? But there was no benefit certainly to Chappaqua Crossing, and there was really no reason to have it to benefit a private road on Cowden Lane. And that report, which was, I believe, attached to the package that we presented, that clearly stated that. We'd really like to redeploy those dollars in helping out with the auditorium, where the public will get to enjoy, rather than a few homeowners on Cowden Lane with a third access point for the water line.
So the last issue is probably the most controversial, and I see that Mr. Williams is here, and I know that this is something that's passionate to you, so I don't mean anything in a disrespectful way. But we reject any sort of sense that this building is historic. We reject any sort of sense that it makes any logic at all to try to preserve little pieces of this building that was renovated many, many times. I know that you've been through it. I have awards for historic preservation. My wife worked at Sotheby's. I have a quite impressive antiques collection. I lived in Mark Twain's Coachman's house. I like old, authentic stuff. And I like people like you that protect it. This building is not. This building is a renovated building, and there's a cost associated with taping what's left of this facade onto this new building, and it's significant. Toll Brothers is now responsible to build it. I've placed all the cost of this in escrow, and Toll Brothers is going to speak for 2 seconds about what they would like to do and the longevity of what they're going to do. John, can you come and introduce yourself?
Hi, good evening. I'm John from Toll Brothers. As Felix mentioned, we are confident we can replicate the facade of the existing guest house. This is what we do as a builder. We are concerned once we start renovating the structure, what we're gonna find. The floors we feel are not they're not adequate. The ceiling heights are tough to work with. The second and third floors of the structure are basically not usable. And again, we are concerned once we turn it over to the residents of the community that we're turning over something that the life expectancy may not be as long as obviously a new structure would be. So those are some of the concerns that we have. And it's also not ADA compliant, so we'd have to build ramps and kind of have to do a lot of things to make it compliant as a structure.
So John,
Yep.
just for the benefit of the town board, how many homes a year does your company build?
We build around 10,000 homes throughout. We're in 20 states, a national builder. This is what we do. New construction is what we are confident in doing, and again, we are very confident we can replicate the facade exactly as it is shown today.
So the point here is to pay respect to Mr. Williams' request that we maintain the aesthetic that he embraces on that property, but to do so with new construction rather than taking some of the old pieces and trying to tape them back onto the building. There's a significant cost to this, which we would like to redirect to something that would be a community benefit. I would point out that this is a clubhouse. It will never be used by the public. It will only be used by 91 homeowners. So these costs are only associated to the benefit of 91 homeowners who I believe as a homeowners association might be happier with a smaller reserve fund to preserve whatever work needs to be done down the line, however one does warranty this. We're proposing that a lot of the dollars that are otherwise be used to do this would be used to complete the improvements at the auditorium. So they will build this new and they will make it look exactly like that. So let me surmise. So for 18 years, we talked about what I needed and what you were willing to give me. And to your point, there was some consensus and there was some opposing opinions. What I've learned is there are things I could have done that would have been better for both of us. I'd like you to take that statement and embrace it, because I don't think that we've done anything over there to suggest that we've done anything that's dishonorable or not trustworthy or not consistent with our promises. And I do believe that we have overreached and overgoverned and over-restricted. 157 conditions on the shopping center might be a little bit too much, but that's where we are today. So there's 3 or 4 little things that we can do. We can save a bunch of money, and we'd like to finish your parking lot. We'd like to finish your handicap access. We'd like to leave Chappaqua as something that we are as proud of as the rest of the project. That's it.
Okay, anyone have questions?
You know, Felix, a couple of things. I think first of all, I think it's important for historical perspective, meaning not historical of the particular building, but what the town has done and what you have done in the back and forth, because there certainly has been back and forth, you know, for both sides. But during my tenure, I know we've been pretty generous, not with my eyesight, but whether I agreed personally or not, we changed the units from 2-bedroom to 3-bedroom and allowed basements. You came before, or your colleagues came before us to change previous footprints of units or structures that was agreed to. There was responsibility with the shuttle service that we agreed to cancel that or put it on pause. And you know, whether it's been perfect or not, nothing's perfect, it's always imperfect. But we have been willing to work with you, and your success, whether it's yours currently or whatever it may be, is a town success. We want it to succeed. And I think that's important. But while certain things I think have changed, certain things haven't. So for example, just using the liquor store as an example, a liquor store. That was something that was agreed to back in 2015, Lisa, before I came, but it was consistent throughout that we all supported that concept because we wanted to protect certain businesses in the hamlet. And that's something that, at least for me, gives me discomfort to make that change, because nothing has changed. The COVID did not change that. I understand the issue you have with the restaurants, that's a separate issue in terms of the use of that space. But there's also 90 units coming, or 91 units that are coming. And in a way, it's sort of the cart before the horse, because I can't compare to I'm not in the industry, but you mentioned a location that had a parking lot for the train that isn't in use. You're actually gonna have 90 units of high-end homes that people are gonna spend, that are gonna give life to that property. That's the whole intention of having it together. And you know, so while some things change, some things haven't. And you know, I don't know what Toll's involvement was when the carriage house was inspected, whether they were involved specifically or not. But these aren't issues, whether the height of the ceiling and the issues potentially with the floor and the cost, these weren't issues then. Or let me rephrase that, I misstated that. If there were issues then, which they were, and there was an agreement, what has changed to now? I mean, it's still the same, and presumably it's been maintained. So it just gives me pause that I understand that you could theoretically build bigger and better or nicer, but one of the things we also learned in a recent issue over zoning in town was people don't want Disneyland, they don't want fake history, they want real history. And that was one of the issues that came to be during our debate locally on zoning. So a facade is one thing, but it's not real, and I'm not an expert in this field, I'm not an architect, I'm not a historian. You know, I certainly understand what Gray says and I respect what he says. So it just gives me concern that what has changed in terms of that building as well. So I'll just sum it up by saying I certainly don't oppose trying to figure things out and work with you, because your success is our success. But we have been generous, you've been generous, certain things have changed, certain things haven't. And I would add actually one last thing, you know, we just had this conversation the other day. My wife almost was struck by a car from behind that crashed into the behind the school, into the stone wall, airbags off, towed away. because that darn whippoorwill curve is as blind as a darn bat on its best day. And you know, you were there, I think you were there with me, and Dave was there with me, I think Christina
I was certainly
Ackerman and
there, yeah.
Rob Greenstein at the time was supervisor, and we were trying to work it out, and I understand that, you know, things get in the way, but it's a nightmare, it's a danger. So there's a lot of give and take, and there's a lot of problems that still need to be rectified. I wish it was that just because all this money is here, could have been spent elsewhere, it wasn't gonna come to us, it wasn't as if all of a sudden we were gonna get the money for the town. I wish it worked that way.
A lot of it did.
You know, it may have, but
And the way the deal is structured, it's supposed to come to you over time because you get to tax. You took an empty office building and we turned it into a host of ratables. And then 91 total homes, if they sell for $1 million each, you tax them as a house.
right.
So there's a monster. This is now,
Yes, but that's also my point, that is going to come, so that may give you some of that relief,
no, it's not, no.
you know, once it's here, but
No,
anyway,
if the shopping center sold for 100 million, you would be taxing it at a value of 100 rather than 79. So I lost money and you're gonna lose money because your ratables are gonna drop on that particular asset, which was a Whole Foods anchored shopping center, which at one point was the gold standard. The townhomes, we jointly created tax revenue. Right, that was, you benefit, you got a grocery store, you've got this building back online, you got a whole host of things, you got a bunch of traffic improvements, I spent money that I didn't want to, I spent money that I had to, I spent money that I wanted to. But I'm supposed to be able to build an asset that has value, and you're supposed to benefit for the future on the value of that asset by being able to tax it.
Yeah.
You bring that back down to the guest house, in terms of our point on the guest house is we think there's a better use of that amount of money right now for the public benefit than taping pieces of an old facade on a new building. We're building a new building and preserving the front facade. That's what we're obligated to do. And that's what we're doing. We're taping the old onto the new. And we think there's a better use of those dollars. Whether, it's up to you to decide. To be honest with you, I've lost a lot of my passion for all the things that were so important so long ago. But I've learned, and I think we should all learn from some of this. And I think that there are things here that we can clearly agree may have been an overreach. We would have learned to have done it in a different way. And now I've come back and said, here's 3 or 4 things that can help us, and if you help us, we will help you. We will make all of those improvements that I told this board we were out of money to make, which we will now make. Heitman is going to contribute to the auditorium improvements. I told them I want to give the town something if they modify these 2 retail conditions. They said, fine, we will contribute to the improvements at the auditorium. That's all we're talking about here. Whether that happens or not, it doesn't change my life in terms of that regard. So there was 1,000 things back and forth, Jeremy. I remember how many times we spent down at your Whipple corner trying to fix the sight lines. You'll also remember the permission to fix those sight lines is not yours or mine or your board's. It belongs to 3 letters that we don't like.
start with a D.
Could be.
The bottom line is, you know, I think the board has been giving and taking as you have been giving and taking, and there's
That's why I'm
we
still
have-
standing
we have
here.
flaws, we have concerns, which I won't voice for everybody, but there are some concerns.
So Jeremy, I just wanna clarify one thing, you said that we paused the shuttle, we only paused the shuttle during COVID. The shuttle has been up and running since September of last year.
I have a legal question about this guest house proposal. Ed, it's really a question for you. Can you tell us what kind of SECRA review, environmental review, that a proposal such as this one that Felix has described, what would that trigger for us legally?
The first thing you'd need to do is circulate a notice of intention to continue as lead agency. And then in your capacity as secret lead agency, you'd have to decide that it's called a proposed action in secret, and here is demolishing the guest house and replacing it with a replica rather than preserving the central structure and building onto it with the more modern. You'd have to conclude as secret lead agency that building the replica in that way would not trigger a significant adverse environmental impact. In 2019, the town board at that time amended for the 6th time the supplemental finding statement and said that because the guest house was being adaptively reused, and it went on and talked about some of the steps that would be taken to preserve the condition, that given those steps, that there would not be an adverse environmental impact. So this board, if it was inclined to take up this issue, would have to make that same assessment and would have to decide whether the replica proposal, and you'd have to get, I think, get a little more granular in terms of exactly, what that entailed. But the replica would not cause a significant adverse impact on historical or archaeological resources, which is what the prior finding was.
And could you tell us what the definition of that is? The historical and archaeological resources definition under SECRA? If you have that handy in your head.
I don't know that there's a definition, but it is more of a concept. And if there is a definition, I will dig it up and provide it to the board.
Right, because I suspect we would be digging into that.
Yeah, conceptually, we're talking about the value that the board as lead agency would ascribe to preserving a historic structure. And then you'd get into the substance over the value of the structure, and a record was created in 2019 in terms of the history of that building. There's also a record of all of the renovations and the interior renovations that took place, and exterior renovations too. There were additions to the building that were not in period, that came later. All that was part of the record in 2019. You'd have to climb back into that and make the same assessment with respect to the replica proposal that's being brought forward now.
So could I just add a follow-on question to that? If that's true, I guess, and maybe this is putting you on the spot and we can take this offline and you can look at it, but does the question answer itself? In other words, if there is historical significance, and if that was a determination based on that review, under what scenario could tearing it down not result in an adverse environmental impact?
Well, technically, what I'm describing is really just the first step. If you find that it would create a significant adverse environmental impact, that's just the beginning of the analysis. That triggers the full environmental review, and it's the process that the board became familiar with over the last 2 years in another context.
Right.
So positive declaration, and you go through all of the steps that SECRA requires to see if you can adequately mitigate the impact.
And I suppose prior to getting to that, we would have to determine whether the structure does fall under whatever definition there may be of a historical structure with archaeological significance.
Now, I guess in that sense, I would
So that's
say
been put into question.
it wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't be looking necessarily for a historic landmark designation or something, some definitional standard necessarily. That wouldn't be required. It could just be something that is that the board as lead agency decides has significance.
I see.
And, excuse me, if I can speak from here, would it be
Can
useful?
Felix,
Yeah,
can you come up?
cause
'Cause
people
otherwise
at home
No,
can't
they
hear you.
sorry.
But it might be useful to remind you of exactly what we're now obligated to do under the current condition, which I keep interpreting in terms of preserving a facade. I wanna make sure that I'm not misrepresenting that amongst the 10,000 things that I also always misrepresent. Dave, what do we, cause you gotta take the building inspector through, what are we actually obligated?
I met with Mr. Williams out there a couple of times, obviously the building inspector, several times to walk through the building. Under the condition of approval, we were obligated to maintain the front facade. That was the main concern in terms of keeping the historical look. Inside the building, we were gonna give the town and Mr. Williams and his team the opportunity to reclaim or take anything they want out of the house, whether it be the floors or the windows or whatever it was, to reuse or save or do something else with. All of that is still on the table and we're happy to do that. But those were our obligations under.
And then I'm leading the witness a
Yeah.
little bit, but how many times did Reader's Digest renovate that building?
Dozens of times. Lisa, you worked at Reader's Digest just like I did, right? So we all know what the history of the guest house was. It was essentially falling apart when we bought it in 2004 because Reader's Digest stopped taking care of it probably in 1999 when they began to, look for the sale of the building.
Financial troubles, yes.
So,
So we were, at the risk of repeating it, we respect Mr. Williams' desire to maintain the historic appearance, which we embrace, and that has been embraced in that rendering. We feel it's more efficient, less expensive, greater longevity for those who are gonna be forced to preserve this, which are 91 homeowners, not me, not Toll, not you, that if we build it new and build it proper and make it look like that, it will survive a long time and it will benefit everyone. And the dollars that would otherwise have been used, we can then use to fix the auditorium. That's the punchline.
Dave, I could just ask you to clarify, because some of the description I'm hearing almost gives me the impression that what you're talking about is like a Hollywood set with just a legit like false facade, and that's really not what the
No,
obligation is.
understood. So, but the main focus was trying to maintain that facade. What we've been working with Toll on and Steve Tilley, the historical architect, is how do we do that and not destroy the rest of the building, right? Right now, our plan is to keep obviously the building. Toll will be repositioning the lower floor only, essentially mothballing the second and third floors, and just using that first floor for a couple of different rooms, because they're not very large. But yeah, I mean, the building would be maintained. We're not gonna take down the building and just keep the front facade. The building would be maintained if you don't give us relief under that particular condition tonight or whenever.
Right.
But you know, the focus when we originally were debating this, you know, years ago, was really the facade and to keep the front facade. That's what everybody was focused on.
Right, and the carriage house, which is that ancillary
house is being
structure to
demolished.
the left, that goes away.
That's correct.
There's an addition on the back that
There's a large
also-
addition on the north side of the building that will be taken down to the original structure.
Right, and then so the original structure remains, and then the Scotch tape comes in with the clubhouse being
Yeah,
joined
but
to the
being joined
original
to-
structure.
yeah.
Okay.
Kind of, yeah.
We know it too well, I guess. It's difficult to explain. You're right. Thank you, Ed.
I do think that the rest of the town board did want to maybe take a little tour of the carriage house, if we could, of the house, if we could, the guest house. If we could set that up just so they can see what
So
they're talking about.
yeah, it's we don't own it anymore, Toll does, but I'm sure we can make that happen. You went through it, didn't you?
I've been through it. I went to parties
Yeah,
there, but I've been through
Parties there? Was it in
They
this?
were good parties.
So if you guys would just
Still
reach
in?
out, Jill, if
Not
you set
recently.
that up, just reach out to Dave and we'll get you back in there
Thank you.
in terms of that regard.
Okay.
I think that's the list. I'll go back down here. So it's so that there isn't a bait and switch. Lots of terms that you guys don't like. Dave, where are the improvements to the auditorium we're committed to make?
Oh, we
Because what Rob taught me was you gotta give a little to get a little. So
Thank you.
All right,
Dave, you're gonna have to describe this because I don't remember. So, and we would, subject to,
no, we got this. I think that our next step, really right now, we can't give you an answer today. We're going to refer this or the relevant sections to the planning board. Because we need to do that so they can consider the ones that aren't before us. Let's get the rest of the town board through the house, and Gray, if you wanna come too, you can come at the same time.
you a guided tour. That would be great.
And then we're gonna talk about all this and we're gonna get back to you as soon as we can. And if we have further questions, we'll definitely make sure to address that.
Can I just, to that point, Ed, can we just get, to whatever extent possible, for all of our benefits, granular understanding of what carryout, how that relates, right? I know we talked about it and
So
I'm sorry, I forget your name.
No, if you guys could give us some guidance on that?
No, your attorney. Janet read the distinctions, and then I asked the question, is Sweet Green carryout? How many square feet is it, how many tables, that would be.
So just so you understand the ask, there's a limitation in that district of 7,500 square feet in the aggregate
I-
for carryout.
Yeah,
We
we
know
understand that.
exactly
Okay, I
what the
just wanna
limit,
make
we know,
sure.
no, we know exactly what the limitation is. I asked the question, if you guys leased to another Sweet Green tomorrow and the total was 8,000 square feet, are we in compliance or are we not?
Are they carry out or are they not?
Are they carry out or are they not?
I
I'd like
think
to know the
Sweet
answer.
Greens and Tom has joined us and he's the last word on interpreting the zoning code in
Right.
this context. But I think, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but a Sweet Greens would be a good example of a carry-out restaurant.
That is correct, and they have the 25% in-house seating, with the majority of food being taken off and consumed elsewhere.
So is Sweet Greens is about 3,000 square feet, a little less?
About 50 square feet less, yes.
So it really, the relief that is being requested only really becomes impactful after you lease up 4,500 additional square feet of restaurant, carry-out restaurant, and then you're up against the, right?
And I think if I were to put myself in Heitman's shoes, I think they're struggling with trying to understand it, and is there an enforcement provision here? Is somebody gonna show up with a clicker and go, it's an imperfect regulation that was designed to prevent fast food. And so we just think we don't think it's a painful modification.
I don't know, fast food was always not permitted, right? Fast food has a separate definition in the town code.
I was there when this stuff evolved, Ed, and there was
I was too.
paranoia about.
Well, maybe a more specific
Well, I think
question.
we were trying to incentivize sit-down white table restaurants.
But to be clear, if they came and said, Chopped wants to come into that space on the corner, that goes before Tom?
Well,
What happens next? Goes before Tom and then Tom says, that space is 6,000 square feet, Chopped is carry out, sorry, no good? Is that what happens?
Well, yeah, at 6,000 square feet, you'd be over, and yeah, that would be a problem.
That's what would happen.
That would happen.
Just to your point about a tape measure, it would be in advance, ex ante, there'd be a determination, sorry, Chopped,
Understanding it better than I do.
Kava's takeout or carry out, can't do it because that plus Sweet Green exceeds 7,500.
You wouldn't be
Okay.
able to get a building permit.
And
That's all
what
I
the Heitman team is concerned about, it's not necessarily for today, it's for 10 years down the road.
Mhm.
Our world has changed obviously since COVID. They're just trying to protect against that in terms of the shopping center for whatever the future may hold with whatever restaurant tenant would come out. I mean, obviously the goal is to get sit-down restaurants there. We'd love to have a sit-down restaurant there, even though we don't own it anymore. I'd like to see one there too, right? And I know certainly the Heitman team would.
Please have them talk to Mentor and Basso.
Dave, I think you just put your finger on it in terms of what the intent was in that 7,500 square foot cap. It was to achieve a balance, right? We didn't,
Right.
the board at the time didn't want to see in all carry-out restaurants.
Right.
And that was what it came up with.
And then we were hit with our pandemic, right? So that was the game changer, and I think that's what they're just trying to protect against.
But I think that there's been a sea change in that kind of, I know it's not mine. But I think that
Somebody
there's
wanted
been a
to.
sea change in the way, restaurants exist today, and in part that's because of COVID, but I think in part that's the way the world has changed. And there are a lot more of these kinds of what we call carry out or fast casual kinds of places, because that's what the demand is for.
Uber Eats, Grubhub, all those things are now based on going to a restaurant and getting food and taking it out.
Right, but they're not based on carry-out restaurants, they're based on regular restaurants.
But that's exactly what's being discussed. They're talking about.
No, it's not. A regular restaurant, a sit-down restaurant, a Kittle House, let's say, just because you can take out food from there does not make it a carry-out restaurant.
The way that thing is written, it prevents that. It gets counted. It's 25% of the space. This is a very confusing.
It's, I understand that a lot of restaurants, most restaurants are doing significant takeout business now. That's not the same as a carry-out restaurant.
Part of my exit, I'm leaving for my son's birthday cake.
That's important.
Happy birthday to him.
Tom,
Happy birthday.
you wanna recognize Tom, and may have another.
Tom,
See ya.
do you have any thoughts?
I apologize for the dog. What is the cap that they are requesting?
No cap, that the 7,500 limitation be removed.
Well, they're not proposing a 10,000, they want carte blanche.
Right, that's what you're proposing, just to remove that, not to increase the limit.
Understood, thank you.
How much is it?
So maybe what would help, I'm certainly less, I'm not answering your question because I don't know how to answer it.
Mhm.
Because it's basically, it was a message I was given. And you had asked, maybe what we'll do is when you regather on this, if this issue has any legs, we'll bring Joe Mastromonaco in and he can talk about who's gonna lease the space and how they operate and that, you know, certainly for whatever the lease term that they're contemplating, 10 years, that's, you know, that's the burden they have.
That would definitely be helpful, and maybe even a representative from Heitman would be helpful.
They're very, very successful and very secretive.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, what they like to do is at some point, they want me to bring them to town and introduce them. And I said, well, you might wanna find a better envoy. But that, they wanted to meet the town at some point so they can introduce themselves, that was really it. But
That would be great. They can call me if they want to.
I know, I give them your cell
I don't think
number.
we're that scary. I guess what I'm left with is the question of what you think of the nearly 100 residential units coming online. I didn't get much clarity about, you know, follow-up on that thought and whether or not this is perhaps premature. You know.
Well, I think, I have to understand, I'm leaving. I'm the common denominator, whether you like me or not, is leaving.
Well, I've always liked you, Felix, and
Well,
it's
yeah,
always
I-
nice to see you. And I was
I
was so nice to you that you always asked to talk to me, so I was surprised that you didn't remember me.
I apologize.
I do think it's quite important to consider all of those residences and people wanting to come out of their homes and going somewhere nice to sit and eat.
Well, and that's a question
So-
for Joe too. Once, you know, that's 91 townhomes is a built-in audience of people who would go to restaurants within walking distance to their home. So that also changes, you know, the leasing dynamics a bit.
The
And
leasing
it's not conceptual anymore. There are giant holes in the ground. Those townhomes are being built right now. So that I think would really change the dynamics of the leasing to say you now will have a built-in audience of people not only who live here, but also who are going to the Performing Arts
It
Center and
might.
wanna eat or
It might,
drink
and
afterward.
when it all gets done and the Performing Arts Center, you know, gets up and going and everybody's kind of functioning, everything feeds off one another.
Mhm.
I mean, Terrain wanted to be here because they saw the synergism that was gonna evolve. And now most of the pieces are slowly coming together. So yeah, it'll have an impact, but it'll probably be 3 years before all of that's done. And Heitman is not Toll, and Toll and Heitman are not Summit. And Summit put the office building on the market last week. Summit's leaving, Summit's tired. Summit's going back to Connecticut where it belongs. And I think there's a desire both on Toll and on Heitman and certainly on Summit's behalf to see if we could tie up whatever the loose ends are. And I also have perspective in terms of some of the things that were important to some of us. And that's this conversation. So I won't be around in 3 years to talk about what the impact of the 91 townhomes are. I hope they get the bloody restaurants in there. I built those stores for restaurants, but they didn't lease.
And I just wanted to point out one more thing, and that is, and I'm sure you remember that when you adopted the regulations for the retail portion of that, you adopted them with certain limitations on uses. So, and I recognize that was to preserve, you know, your downtown area, but there are certain things that, you know, as Felix said earlier, well, we've got enough nail salons or whatever, but all personal services are prohibited in that shopping center. So things that people might be interested in having there, they're not allowed there. And so that leaves a limited number of retailers who can actually go there. and there's empty space there. So, you know, we're looking for the relief to be able to lease up that space and create the rateable that everybody wanted. So, you know, that's something that, you know, we hope you consider.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Alright, so again, we will be referring this to the planning board, at least the portions relevant to the planning board. And I'm sure we'll be talking with them and we'll get their views on their portions. And we will look at this as quickly as possible and get back to you.
Okay, cool. It's nice to see everyone
Okay?
and to go down memory lane.
It's good to see you too.
And thank you for listening. Nice to see you, Greg. Welcome.
Thank you.
Christian.
Thanks for your time.
You sound like a very informed new member. I think you got some real estate chops somewhere. I think you're misleading me.
Deep in there somewhere.
Jill, nice to see you. Ed, nice to see you.
Bye, thank you.
Alright, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dave, you'll let us know a good time to walk through?
Let me know what time that works for you and
Yeah, I
I'll coordinate it with Toll. I'm
Oh, right.
out remotely next week, but that I can certainly make the arrangements. If you want me there, I'm happy to be there, but I just can't be there next week.
Yep,
Great.
okay.
Thank you so much.
Happy to
Thank
walk
you.
I'd like to be there, to be honest with you, but it's up to you. Okay, thank you, Greg. Then I will be there. Okay, so
Alright.
we'll do it for the week
Excellent.
after next.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
My turn.
sure.
Gray Williams, town historian. The proposal to tear down the building would be a complete betrayal of its historical significance. It would have a significant impact on the historical flavor. This is a unique building. It is not true that it has been radically changed over the years. Quite the reverse. It was built in the 1850s and it has been loved. And so people took care of it and changed it bloody little. It is not quite true to say that we're only interested in the front facade. We're interested in the whole exterior. We're interested in the interior too, but legally, that's none of our business. This goes back to 2009 when it was proposed to Felix that it be landmarked. Turned us down, surprise. But then he forgot that he wrote a letter, which you have and I have, saying that he was going to preserve both this building and the headquarters building. He made a definite promise. But by the time the property was sold to Toll Brothers, that promise had been forgotten. They weren't aware of this, and I'm sort of sympathetic about this. This isn't their bag. They don't like this building. They started off 4 or 5 years ago with a proposal just simply to tear it down and put up something else. They maintained that it was not in good shape. That proved to be quite untrue. But at any rate, when this was aired before the planning board said, no, you may not tear that building down. There was the resolution in 2019 is a compromise. As I say, that what they decide, all right, we'll preserve the exterior of the building, but we're gonna gut it. We're gonna take out all the interior, and we're gonna have one big open space in there. And the resolution permitted this, although Tom DePole, pointed out that this was extremely risky and would be very expensive to do. Then they did something good. They hired the best restoration architect in the area, the most famous and the one who's the most authoritative, Steve Tilley. And he made it to a double report. The first was to point out exactly what would be required to shore up the building if they took all the interior support out of it. Because it's a post and beam building, it's not like modern construction at all. And they accepted this. He then came up with a plan, essentially utilize the first floors as Dave did it. And up until 2 months ago, that plan was accepted to everyone's vast relief, including mine. Now, they want, again, they're back at it again. They want to tear down the building. They've never wanted it. They would rather, they say it would be expensive. I've seen the plans. I don't think that's really quite true. I think they'd have to submit a budget to prove it, and measure it against the cost of building something else. But at any rate, it would be a terrible sacrifice to lose this building. A
Greg,
replica is not.
Can you send to the board, I think you did a PDF presentation about the building?
I will send you, I
that
will
might
send you a
be
history,
interesting
I will send
for
you a history of the
rest of the
building.
board.
I will send you a summary of what I've just told you of the events. I never did that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, I don't know how this works, but the planning board would provide the details and I can verify what I say. But I'll prepare that report too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be glad to show you through the house, which is one of several that was built in the 50s during a period of relative prosperity in Chappaqua. It was when the railroad arrived. But this is better than they, because it has been so little changed. It has the original floors, has the original staircase. The only change that was in the back, where they had to attach this umbilical cord leading to this banquet hall that the digest put in. But that's remediable. Other than that, they have to do precious little. In fact, it would be relatively cheap as far as I could figure out. And I don't think that it's justified on the basis of cost. But whatever it costs, it would be, in my view, an irremediable loss to the community to let this building be destroyed. Okay?
Thank you, Greg.
I just wanna clarify something that you said. It seems to me from your statement here that the cost would really be a function of their decision to gut the interior.
Yeah, the problem with gutting the interior was you had to build a whole new structure, either outside or inside, to shore up the walls to keep them from collapsing while you did all this, because of the way the building is constructed. Tom DePole can fill you in on that. Am I right, Tom? That it would be very expensive to gut the building the way it is, because you have to protect it from falling down. Yes?
That is correct. You'd be cutting the superstructure in components out of the building, and if you want it to implode at that point. So they would have to make provisions to secure as they cut away the intersections, which is a difficult undertaking from working with and highly engineered, project this would be.
And to be precise, at the risk of being repetitive, but I wanna highlight what I think is significant here. You also said that it would be relatively inexpensive to leave the interior
Oh, absolutely.
as designed.
There's very little
Wanna be
cost
clear.
involved. The plan that Steve came up with makes very little change.
Although it's not ADA compliant.
Hmm?
It's not ADA compliant, but I
Doesn't
guess
have to
if they
be.
don't touch it, it
Well,
doesn't.
Doesn't have to be.
You're proposing they could leave it but not use it in any real ways.
It does not have to be completely ADA compliant.
That's right.
Because of its
John,
historic,
Mhm.
because of its, you don't expect an ancient building to be ADA
No,
compliant.
I know.
Right.
I mean, if they
Or-
don't touch it, really, they
That's
don't
what I'm
need to do
saying,
anything.
just to be
But
clear.
yes,
But-
they're gonna put, it would require some ramps. Gee, we're not talking big expenses. Toll Brothers will not go hungry tonight for what it would cost to do the few things that Steve, and you ought to see that plan. Which, as I say, they've agreed to up until a couple of months ago, but now they're back wanting to, because this doesn't quite meet their requirements. But they were told to make adaptive reuse of the building, and that's what they ought to do.
So I think, I was here when those discussions were made, which is why I'm not asking as many questions, but I think it would be very helpful to, yes, have you, when we go on a tour of that building, to have you there. And then also if you could forward all that information.
Yeah.
I can, so I'm familiar with the packet of information that was circulated in 2019. It's 178 or 9 pages.
Yeah, but I don't
PDF.
have all of that.
But-
Well, as a matter of
but-
fact, I do, but.
Well, what I can do is I can recirculate that, and then if there's anything that, and I'll include you on that email, and if there's anything in that that's not in that packet that you wanna add to, maybe that's easier.
Well, that's TMI. That 178 pages. I don't recommend it as light reading. I mean, most of that was photographs
They were helpful.
interior.
No, they
They-
were helpful.
they-
It was a
did-
helpful
Yes, that exists, but
But we're gonna see that in person.
yeah, you may not want to get through all of that. But the summary of what happened, that I can give you. It should be checked with the planning board, it's really their responsibility. But I will send a copy of Felix's original letter, which I have. And anything else I can think of. But I'll keep it brief.
Thank you,
All right,
Greg.
that's perfect.
Thanks, Greg.
All right,
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you,
you
and
all.
we'll contact you when we can figure out a
Set up
day
tour.
yeah,
to take that tour.
Great.
all right,
you.
thank you for your listening.
Thank you so
Thanks
much,
so much,
Gray.
safe
Good night.
home.
Good night.
Don't forget me. All right, the next two things on the work session agenda have to do with traffic recommendations by the chief, modifications. One is a stop sign on Pin Oak Lane, and the other is a yield designation of Briarcliff Road as a yield street. Both of these would require simple local laws that we would set for public hearings. So if the board is okay with them, I'll put them down to set a public hearing.
Yes.
to
Great.
And the chief will come talk to us at the
Yes,
public
absolutely
hearing.
at that point.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Next we've got administrative items. I'm gonna go through them quickly, but I'm gonna stop when it comes to the Logically contract. Rob is here and he's been working very hard. Logically is our IT consultant. They are the successor to Sullivan Data, who took care of the town for years. Rob, why don't we start with that, because it's really one of the most important things that we've got here.
Sure, that's fine. So as Jill was mentioning, Sullivan Data was our IT service provider for, I don't know, probably 20 years. They predate me. And Glenn, the owner of that, sold to a company called Logically that apparently has been buying up local entities. They're a national firm that provides IT services. So our contract with Sullivan actually ended April 1st. A year ago, Logically extended under the same terms that we had with Sullivan while they kind of transitioned, and now we're fully, I guess, integrated into their framework, and now they presented us with the new proposal for they kind of have it structured into 3 distinct areas. So the first is the support services, and that's basically the help desk. When you or any of our staff members call, there's always somebody that answers, and they work on typically off-site. We do have a package of on-site support. There are reasons that they have to come out to the office on a routine basis. So that's the first component. The second is the secure care package, and this is some cybersecurity improvements. It's I guess it's what they recommend to their clients. Some of these things were already included with Sullivan Data, some are updates and some were things that we didn't have altogether. We're about to renew our cybersecurity policy. We're actually going up for quotes right now. And as part of that, they do an assessment on our system, and they identified a couple areas that they recommended to us that we improve, and we passed that along to Logically. So that's one component. And the third is the offsite backup. So that is, we currently have a triple redundancy where we back up all of our files on site here. One copy of that is backed up in Yorktown, and another copy is down in, I think, Dallas, Texas somewhere. So we always have the capability to restore from any of these backups should there be any should we have any kind of cyber attack, ransomware, that type of thing, we could restore our system. So this total package amounts to about $157,000 annually. We were paying about $125, $130 before under Sullivan data when you add those three components together. So it's definitely an increase. We did anticipate that in the budget this year. So we want to retroactive that to April 1st. It was the old Sullivan data model where every renewal, I don't know why it was on April 1st, but it was. So I think it's a 1-year contract, but I think we can, was it 3 years? I think it's basically 3 1-year contracts we can renew with both parties' agreement. There is a CPI clause that will
Kick in.
kick in.
Can I, just a basic question, we've never actually gone through this, what is our technology stack for the town? Are we cloud-based or do we have servers
No,
on site?
it's server.
It's on-premises servers?
Yep.
They're here?
They're here, yes.
And what's sort of our security protocol for that? Is it a locked closet?
Locked room.
Yeah,
Ventilation sprinklers?
Yes.
executive session would make me feel comfortable.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
fair enough, yeah, we don't wanna
But we-
betray that
yeah.
cyber confidence, okay. And then in terms of the cyber review, that's a separate firm, right? So logically is doing it, but then you have
Correct.
a separate firm that does an audit effectively?
Yeah, that is I guess an industry standard with the cybersecurity. They do kind of an analysis before they issue us a quote. It's an independent firm. I think RJ could better
Yeah.
explain that.
It was from our insurance company who actually did it.
Got it, okay, yeah, that's sort of best practice to have someone separate apart from your.
Yes, absolutely.
And then you mentioned redundancy in Yorktown and then Dallas.
Yep.
What's the frequency of our backups? Is it a feed on a daily basis?
Yes.
Okay, we got it.
Yeah, so the files, it's actually within the hour. It just continuously backs up. Any files that are updated throughout the day are constantly swapped out.
And then last question, sorry, the $150,000 as part of the MSP contract?
Yep.
That covers customer service for all employees and advisory board, anyone who has a town email
Correct.
effectively? Got it, okay.
So what this doesn't cover, and we're gonna come back to you in the next couple of weeks once we finalize that, are project-based things. So
Sure,
this
of
is
course.
standard support. I'm gonna come back to you. They didn't have the quotes refreshed for me. We have a hardware refresh that's coming, hopefully they'll have it for me for next week, where we are actually gonna replace a couple of servers throughout town, actually 3 servers, some firewall stuff. You'll see that, there'll be a memo. That was anticipated for, we borrowed money back in 2018. We typically do that for IT on kind of a 4 or 5 year plan. We borrow at the beginning of it and we have a software plan for the next 5 years laid out.
And do they and or the cyber consultant do, not to betray anything, but these are standard things like phishing and pen testing and all that
Yes,
stuff?
yes,
Okay, great,
yes.
great.
Staff training, things like that.
Yeah, they do staff training once a year at least. They talk about the phishing and the
Right, and then they run they run these pop quizzes for lack of a better
right,
term
great,
to see
yep,
how well
perfect.
we do or don't do as the
Yep.
case may be.
Great.
And you'll see one other topic that we're gonna discuss and this will come up. We had the system downtime a couple weeks ago. We're gonna switch over to Office 365, which will then be a cloud-based system.
That's right, we have
So we're gonna go to that,
365.
and once we do that, we're gonna also include multi-factor authentication. So you'll need
I
that to
know.
log
Welcome to this century.
Very smart.
We are, yeah, so we're trying
right,
to,
yeah.
I don't know if I'd say we're getting out in front of it, but we're trying not to lag behind, so you'll see that in the next couple of weeks.
Great, thanks,
We
Rob.
we will adopt no technology before it's time, don't we?
Alright, what else we have here? Thank you, Rob.
Alright, and we've just got a whole bunch, we've got a couple of banner requests, Chappaqua Children's Book Festival, Evening Out. We've got a number of authorizations to extend the purchase and installation of a number of things. We've got it for highway materials, underground services, authorization, extension of our tree contract with Olmsted. Usually when we go out to bid for a term and then there's a series of 1 year extensions. And so we're in the midst of the 1 year extensions on most of these, which is, what we're talking about. Let's see. We are purchasing additional water meters. There's a unique type that the department holds on to, so in anticipation of the 91 townhomes and some upgrades coming down the pike. The next is authorization to award DPW for the water chemical bids, item number 2. If you recall, this is the caustic soda that we had a hard time holding the price on for a year. We could only get 6 months, we rebid it for 6 months, and now we're ready to take and award it. The next is an authorization to enter into an agreement with iWork Systems. It's actually a scheduling system, a tracking system of assignments that DPW has investigated and believes it will help with their efficiency. And as a matter of fact, when we were speaking at the department head meeting the other day, Ike was very interested in using it for parks as well. So I think it's gonna be a good purchase and a step up for us. We just talked about the Logically contract renewal. We've got Evening Out that's going to be once again renting the conference room at the Chappaqua for the month of June. It's my understanding that this will be the last month that they'll be there. And then we've got an authorization to enter into agreements with Seven Bridges Swim and Tennis Club. This is for swim services and facilities used for our summer and summer camp. And we're renting one tent for our summer camp recreation. We do have a couple of items on the agenda for approval, a couple of resolutions.
Sure. Payment of claims, checks dated June 8th, 2022. I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $368,452.25 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detail voucher detail report, both dated June 3rd, 2022. Checks will be cut and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, June 8th, 2022.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. Authorization to award DPW 2022-04 water chemicals bid for item number 2. I move to authorize the award of bid for DPW 2022-04 item number 2, liquid caustic soda to JCI Jones Chemicals Inc., 1765 Ringling Boulevard, Sarasota, Florida 34236 for the 6-month purchase contract at the cost of $1.69 per gallon. Is that right? Or gallon?
It's about a gallon.
Is it a word I
It's
don't
gallon.
know? I mean,
$1.69 a gallon
okay,
Gallon.
$1.69 per gallon
per gallon.
with quarterly adjustments.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm glad to know that caustic soda doesn't have its own strange measure,
Yeah,
unit of measure.
I'll read one more. Resolution adopting a local law regarding the development of apartments below street level in the BR and BRP zoning districts. I move to adopt the following resolution. Whereas on April 19th, 2022, the town board introduced a proposed local law to amend chapter 60 of the town code zoning to allow the development of apartments below street level but with grade level ingress egress in the BR and BRP zoning districts. And whereas by resolution adopted on April 26, 2022, the town board scheduled a public hearing and referred the proposed local law to 1, the Town of Newcastle Planning Board pursuant to Town Code section 60-600, and 2, the Westchester County Planning Board pursuant to New York General Municipal Law section 239-M and the Westchester County Administrative Code. And whereas by memorandum dated May 18th, 2022, the Newcastle Planning Board expressed its unanimous support for the proposed local law. And whereas on May 24th, 2022, the town board held a public hearing on the proposed local law and thereafter accepted written comments through June 3rd, 2022 at 5 p.m. At which times all those wishing to comment on the proposed local law had an opportunity to be heard. And whereas the proposed local law constitutes a type 2 action pursuant to the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, 6 New York CRR section 617.5, C18 and 33, and accordingly no further environmental review is required. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board hereby adopts the local law and directs the town clerk to transmit a copy of same to the Westchester County Planning Board.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Chris, I wanted to thank you for bringing this before the town board. I think it's a really great law. So thank you. Wanna do the next one?
Yes, authorization to approve contract renewal with Logically. I move to authorize a contract renewal with Logically Inc. to provide various software and hardware support services effective retroactively to April 1st, 2022 through March 31, 2023, broken down into 3 distinct services, each charged separately on a per month basis, as more fully stated in the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Authorization to purchase emergency rental services for 2,000 kilowatt generator for the Millwood Water Treatment Plant. I move to authorize the purchase of emergency rental services for a 2,000 kilowatt generator for the Millwood Water Treatment Plant from H.O. Penn Machinery Co. Inc. / H.O. Penn Leasing LLC at 122 Knoxon Road, Poughkeepsie, New York 12603 for the monthly rate of $27,000 with the additional monthly costs of $6,000 for cables and $600 for male-female pigtails for the total monthly cost of $33,600 as per the quote dated June 7th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Authorization to obtain RFPs for real estate broker services. I move to authorize the town of Newcastle to request proposals from qualified real estate brokers to assist with the sale of town-owned residential property located at 48 Hates Cross Road, Chappaqua, New York.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Alright, anything else? Nope. Okay, so can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Alright, good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody, thank you very
Good
much,
night.
thank you,
Thanks,
thank
Rob.
you.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Ed. Vicky, I don't know how you kept a straight face when you said $600
Pigtails.
for the
I don't know either.
Hey,
again.
of course.
Hey, Martin.